So, good morning. Wanted to talk about soil, especially when amending the soil in the ground when planting a fresh tropical fruit tree in our native clay soil. So, before I begin, though, it may be pretty obvious, but I feel that I need to say this. The Central Valley is mostly clay soil. If you happen to live in a region of the world that is mostly sand and has very little clay, a lot of this really should not apply to you. And also, if you live in a more tropical region, a lot of this you do not need to do. I mean, it'd be more concerning that to me that you can't grow tropical fruit trees. But in our climate, just because we've got crazy insane freezes towards the end of March, we are still getting freezes. Central Valley, this is typical for us. So, and then as soon as May hits, we go straight up to the 90s, and then summer is going to be in the hundreds. So, that extreme of a temperature, there are special strategies that you can apply when putting these guys in the ground to ensure that they make it for the first and the second year. That's really how long it takes these guys to really establish the roots in the ground. And once they are established, I know I keep saying this, but they're fine. They handle the elements without any difficulties. However, the first part to getting a tree being successfully grown in the Central Valley is going to be amending the planting soil when you're putting it in the ground for the first time, because I mean this is its home now. I mean, these guys are stationary, they are stuck to the ground, just exposed, and they're just really left to their own devices. But again, once they're happy with their home, they don't care. I mean, the elements can throw the coal at it, throw the heat at it. They take it like champs. So I wanted to talk about, though, the reason why we amend the soil when putting trees in the ground. Imagine, okay, at the if you have a microscope at the particle level, this imagine this is a size of a sand, a grain of sand. So soil really composed of three primary ingredients: sand, silt, and clay. And guess what we have in the Central Valley? Clay. So you want to incorporate some of these other elements into it to allow the tree to thrive in our climate. So size of a sand, and then silt. Silt is basically just broken down sand. It's just a finer particle of sand. It's essentially sand, just smaller. Now, you ready? Clay. This is clay. This represents clay. Like, look at it. Look at how small it is. The problem with clay is when you bunch it up, when you compact it, which is what you would want to do, it look at it. There's like practically no oxygen in there. Whereas with sand, when there's a lot of sand particles, there is a lot of gaps here and there. Trees, the roots don't need much oxygen, unlike you and I, where if you bury me, I'm probably gonna be gone in the next 30 seconds. Most trees are good for like 48 hours. Most trees, there's exceptions, but most trees they usually can hold their breath for about 2 days. So, I mean, look at the gaps of the sand particles when they are clumped together. In addition to the air gaps in there, it also allows for drainage. When you pour water into sand, it's going to go to all the little gaps. So drainage is not an issue with sand. Whereas with clay, I mean, yeah, like what drainage is there? In fact, if you take a look at the pond hole that I dug up, I finally took the opportunity to take out the pond that I had in there. I mean, you know, luckily in my case, in my opinion, I actually feel that I have a good drainage. I mean, it had been like that for, I mean, for about maybe a day or so now. I mean, it last rained about, I want to say maybe a day and a half ago. And so that amount of little water that I've got in there, that tells me drainage is relatively good in my case. So that's not to say, I mean, it may sound like I'm knocking on clay soil. That's not the case at all. I'm in our climate in Central Valley, with the drought that we've been having for the past 10, 20 years now, hopefully getting broken by all the rain that we've been getting. But you know, I'm really glad that we have clay soil because there are actually some benefits to clay soil. Clay acts like a sponge. It absorbs water, which means I don't need to water these trees as often as if I were to say like have sandy soil. Same with fertilizing it. I mean, with the sand and fertilizer, it just leaches down to the ground. Whereas clay, it really has a good job of holding on to fertilizer, particularly liquid fertilizer. And also, more importantly, clay, because of its structural integrity, the roots of the trees have a good solid foundation. I mean, this guy's not going to go anywhere. Whereas with sand, I mean, you know, one little hurricane comes to it, it gets toppled over. Yeah, this guy's not going to go anywhere. So there's a lot of benefits to clay. There's also a lot of downside to clay. The downsides, we can easily work around those by amending the clay soil with sand and other uh, medium that makes it favorable to tropical fruit trees. So let me show you really quick. So this is my goal for, as soon as the weather warms up someday. Miracle berry, okay? Miracle fruit tree, miracle berry. It goes by both names. This particular guy likes the soil to be extremely acidic. Acidic level that this guy would prefer is right around 5. In our clay soil, if you don't make any amendments to it, you're likely gonna be around 8. Which would mean if I stick this guy into the ground in our clay dirt without amending the soil, it is gonna starve. It is gonna eventually die because it is starving. No matter the amount of fertilizer you give to it, it cannot uptake the nutrient because its soil conditions are a bit too alkaline. So what happens is the roots, when it's too alkaline, it just locks it up. It just cannot uptake the nutrient. I mean, the nutrient's there, it just cannot pick it up. And that's again because of the pH level that is surrounding it. So to do that, what do I need to do? In my case, I'm going to amend the soil heavily. And this is the formula that I've been using. I've been using um, about 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 sand, and 1/3 native soil. Notice there's practically no organic material in there. Peat moss, yes, technically in this context, it is organic in the sense that peat moss were living and now they're not. But when I say organic, I'm talking more like potting soil, which essentially, when you look at it, this is a good example of potting soil. I'm not going to be using this in there. In fact, I'm probably not going to be using this period. I mean, this might be a great ground cover on the top, but I'm not going to be incorporating basically anything that's organic in there. Just because what happens is these are just basically ground up wood chip, which would mean they will decompose generally in about half a year. Whereas peat moss in the wild, in the bog wetlands, these guys, peat moss, takes thousands of years to decompose in their native underwater wetlands. However, because I'm putting it in the ground, not in any wetland, it still is going to take it several years to decompose, which I'm okay with. By that time, this guy should be well established. So that's really the goal, is to give them a good home, to give them as close to the native growing condition as possible in the ground. That way its roots, once it's grown out of the hole, should have no difficulties accessing the soil in my clay dirt, in the clay soil. Just because, again, it should already have been acclimated at that point. So the reason why I choose peat moss over like coconut coir, for example, is there's a lot of advantage in my case to peat moss. Peat moss has a crazy acidic level. You're talking like 3. So pH of 3, and this guy likes a pH of 5. So when I combine this with sand and native dirt is, again, let's just go with 8. It should balance out to right around 5 or so, which is great for this guy. Now, for other trees that I know the pH needs to be a bit higher, like this red ruby longin here, I'm gonna add slightly more sand and slightly more native dirt, uh, and less so the peat moss, just because this guy's a bit more forgiving, just from experience. I mean, that's how we're able to grow them here. They're a bit more forgiving as opposed to the growing requirements of the miracle-berry. So, and also another reason that I chose peat moss too is the fact that it's breathable, and also at the same time it acts like a sponge. It's able to absorb water and hold onto the water and release it as the tree needs the water. So there's just a lot of benefits to it. Now, there's some controversials with using peat moss, particularly around sustainability. But when you look at Canada, there's just so much vast bog wetland up there that I don't know if that's really an issue. Most of peat moss comes from Florida, not Florida, Canada. This particular batch of peat moss came from Canada. So sustainability, do some research, but it's I don't think it's an issue. So that being the case, I wanted to really diverge really quick on what I had mentioned in my previous videos, particularly around how the roots of tropical fruit trees don't go deep. So this hole that I dug for the pond is roughly maybe about a foot and a half deep. If you come here, actually, let me see if I can show you. If you look at this closely, look at it. I mean, this is just here's the grade, and this is the amount of wood chip. It's what, maybe 6 inches deep for the most part. I mean, these are the feeder roots. These are the ones that are searching for nutrients. So there's practically no roots down in the deep section of this hole. Look at the roots from this inga tree here. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's from this tree right here. So there is probably a very deep taproot. However, these are really the feeder roots that you need to be concerned about. These are the ones that are searching out for nutrients and then giving it to the tree and making it overall healthy. Yeah, I mean, when you look down underneath here, there's worm activity there, there's worm poop, but for the most part, like, there's most of the time the roots are just up in the foot's width of soil. So yeah, I mean, these roots are likely from this cherry starfruit here, and then roots here from this Malay apple here. So yeah, it's when you look at the hole that I'm going to be putting the miracle berry into, I'm not really concerned about the depth of it. It's more so the width, how wide the hole is going to be, just because the roots of trees will go wide as opposed to deep. So I'm going to be filling it up with a lot of amendments and native soil in order to put that guy in the ground here. Just because, again, it's well, and also the reason why I'm actually putting it that tree here as opposed to somewhere else is I need the microclimate that is afforded by this position, because I know that tree once we get into the May temperature, once we get into the 90s, it is gonna get sizzled. It's just not a fan of direct sun. So that's why I'm putting it here where it's actually mostly shaded. And wintertime, that guy is not gonna like the frost. So I'm hoping that the mother tree above us and also surrounding it will give it a lot of frost protection. But yeah, the miracle berry is just a fun tree to have. So that's why I'm gonna put it here along with a bunch of other trees. Um, Another thing too is when you look at it, spacing. I also get a lot of criticisms about spacing. Like, why are my trees so close together? Well, because I can put them close together because I need the protection of nearby trees in order for some of the trees to make it. So that's why they're a couple foot apart from each other. I mean, it's going to be smack right in the middle between the longan, the Inga, pineapple grava, between the starfruit here, between the Malay apple, and between the black sapote. Again, in the wild, okay, just imagine in the wild, when an animal grabs a fruit off of a tree, it is purely by chance that that seed gets grown where it's going to be growing. I mean, the animal is not going to strategically space them apart. So that's what I'm trying to mimic here is in the wild, it's really by chance. However, in my case, it is really more so the microclimate that I need just because of our climate. So yeah. So anyhow, yeah, that's really it. I'm gonna be, as soon as the weather warms up, I'm gonna be putting some of the trees in the ground. But I just wanted to kind of really show you why in our case, and if your growing condition is similar to ours, um, I mean, yeah, if you put that guy in the ground in native dirt, it may do okay. I mean, but why chance it, especially when you can just, just amend it really easily and it's just a one-time deal. So yeah, I mean, again, what I do is put 1/3 peat moss, 1/3 sand, 1/3 native dirt in a wheelbarrow, mix them all up, put them in the ground, and then just put the soil in there, in the plant in there. So yeah, that's really it. So hopefully this video helps. I mean, there are some trees that yes, you could stick in the ground without making any amendments to its home, but the tree really would appreciate it if you slowly allow it to acclimate. I mean, mangoes are notorious for being sensitive to pH. Yeah, this guy needs the soil to be just at the right level, and then after a year or two, it has no problem. Whereas other trees are a bit more forgiving, like jaboticaba. This guy doesn't care. You probably could stick it in the ground and it probably will grow. But again, it is just so easy for us to just amend the soil and just stick it in the ground, and yeah, trust me, it's just slightly better than just sticking the tree in the ground without any amendments. Again, I mean, you're depending on where you get information. I mean, other people may tell you to incorporate some compost into your mixture. Don't do that. Compost, along with any organic material, is going to be okay on the top as a dressing, but don't put it in with your mixture. In the wild, forests or the jungles of Southeast Asia, the actual dirt has very little organic material. Instead, the organic material usually sits on top. Like if animal walks by, it takes a poop, it's going to stay on top of the soil. When an animal dies, it's going to probably stay on top of the soil. It never gets mixed into the soil. So that's really the whole concept that I'm trying to mimic in my yard. And so far, I mean, I think I've had relatively good success with this project. So yeah, anyhow, yeah, just amend your soil, and hopefully the explanation I give you made sense. So, all right, have a good afternoon.